Good evening. Well, there goes my introduction, but thank you anyway. But welcome to the 6th Annual Dean Arcangelo Cascieri Lectureship in the Humanities. My name is Bernie Goba. I'm an alum of the BAC, past chair of the board, currently a member of the board of directors, and also chairman of the Cascieri Lectureship in the Humanities Committee, as well as the chairman of the Cascieri Endowment Fund, which we established 3 years ago. The purpose of which is to create an endowment to ensure the continuity of these lectures in perpetuity in honor of the Dean's memory. I'd like to introduce two people who are very important to this school, and they'd like to have some welcoming remarks. The first of which is the chairman of the board of directors, Fred Noyce. Fred?
I look at an event like this, and I'm really overwhelmed by the amount of effort it takes to put something like this on. And as chairman of the board, it feels pretty good. Everybody's working for me, right? So I really that sense of community that comes out at something like this is terrific. I want to make a plug for another event, which is for another group which is working very hard. That's Bob Sturges, who has a symposium on the 3rd and the 4th of April. That symposium is about teaching, about creativity, and something that I would hope you all attend. And then, as long as I'm making a plug, I'd like to talk about other people who work for me, and that's the full faculty and the staff and all that. It's just, feels great being on the head of this whole team. A lot of you don't know the BAC very well, so the punchline is that that all these people work without compensation, and so you say, "Wow, wow, that's amazing. How kind of energy do you get here to work without compensation?" And that's where, as the chair of the board, you say, "I must be some kind of leader," right? Well, it turns out that obviously it's not me who's the leader, but we did have a leader who does inspire all that, and that's clearly the dean. And he really did have a sense of what it meant to be a community and a center and so forth, which is the reason all this happens. So I think it's particularly appropriate that this lecture, which is in a sense the flagship of what we're about, should be in honor of the dean. Now I want to make one other point, and that is that this is the Boston Architectural Center. It has a school within it, but it is a center. And that is also particularly appropriate tonight because the notion of it being a center means that we are publicly based. And so we have two very public people here, Mr. Leventhal, alias Mr. City, and Chris Lydon, who's probably more informative than the New York Times on a daily basis. I have never figured out how you can know all the questions and all the people of every single person you interview. Matter of fact, what we ought to do, Ted, is we ought to get him to teach a course on cramming. Hey, it's my job to think of the big ideas, right? So this commonality of the idea of public and the lectureship and the deanship all coming together in this one event is really, I think, what the BAC is about and the subject of our board meetings. How do we increase that sense of the public? And to that sense, I say, join us. We need you. This is an open institution. It's a public institution. It's not private. We're looking for extensions outside of architecture and interior design directly. So if this is the flagship, we're going to follow the flag, in the architectural sense of the people, for the people. Oh, gosh. Thank you.
Fred, you're beginning to sound more and more like Jack Palance in City Slicker. But nice comments, though. Thank you. Our next speaker is the president of the Boston Architectural Center, Ted Lensmark. Ted.
It's not a particularly well-known fact, but we are now the largest independent architecture school in New England, the fourth largest in the country. We have a faculty of roughly 300, and as we calculated, that means that roughly 1 out of every 10 architects who is registered, licensed in the greater Boston area is on our faculty now. Because we are as large as we are, and because we've been around since 1889, we also feel a very major public responsibility, and I want to reemphasize what it is that Fred has said, which is there are schools in this area, and lots of schools have lectures, but we are a center, and we urge and invite and encourage you to come in and use us as a forum for debate and ideas on the built environment. We want to share ideas among ourselves. You've already discovered that we have the best gallery space and the best space for bringing people together on Newbury Street, so we urge and encourage you to come back and stay with us and debate the issues of the day as they relate to the built environment. I want to particularly thank Beacon Skanska for sponsoring this event tonight. There are a number of folks here from Beacon Skanska. I'm not going to ask everyone to stand, but without their support, this would not have been possible. I want to thank from the Beacon companies, in particular, Ronnie Pick and Stephanie Weatherby. When Norman came in, the first thing he wanted to do was to see how the space looked and how it worked. They installed the exhibition for us. They did, I think, a superlative job, and we encourage you to get your friends to come by and take a look at the exhibition. It'll be up for the next couple of weeks. I also want to acknowledge the two folks whose thesis work is on the walls here, Dominic Rovetto and Troy Randall. In one case, a very recent graduate, and in another case, a current student, so that you have a sense of the quality of the work that goes on in this place. I'll just conclude by saying that Chris and I go back a number of years to when he ran against my former boss. He lost, but here we both are together. Norman and I go back a few years to the days when he was doing Rose Wharf, and I was part of a rabble community group that kept saying you have to keep the waterfront open, and he did, and as a result we have one of the most spectacular buildings along the waterfront, which is an open, shared public space. And the one thing I've always wanted to be able to say to Norman, this kind of forum, is that we're extraordinarily grateful for the work that you've done, and we all have to think of what the quality of life would be in this city were it not for his work. And so with that, thanks to Norm and also to Chris for helping us with tonight's event. And now let me turn this back over to Bernie.
Thank you, Ted. Just a couple of housekeeping notes that I want to get clear before we get on with the introductions, and one has to do with, can you still hear me in the back all right? This is yes, this is no. Thank you. One has to, upon the death of the dean, the Cascieri, DiBaccari, Salsa, Shore family got together and decided to make 10 castings of one of his sculptures, which was the sculpture of Eve, which is standing over there to the left. They made 10 of them, 7 of which went to family members, and they donated 3 to the BAC to be used in the fundraiser for the endowment. And they have set a dollar amount as to what they think the value is, and if you wish to talk about it, I'll be happy to discuss it with you later. But we have 2 remaining. We have one has been given away. And the other has to do, if you saw the woodcuts that are out in the lounge, and that several years ago, when Mark Salsa, the dean's nephew, was cleaning out his basement, he came across the original box of woodcuts that the dean used to make his annual holiday greeting cards. And he did this for 40 years. And he found them quite by accident, and Mark Salsa has agreed to make 2 copies of that each year for sale by the group here at $25 apiece. All the money of which will go back into the fund. Now, Mark is a delightful, creative, energetic, exuberant personality. He stinks at math. I mean, if there are 40 there and he's going to do 2 a year, that means he's on the committee for 20 more years. And we're very pleased with that. but they're out there and you can see them. I want to thank the committee who has worked for the past year to bring this all together. Quite specifically, I want to thank Peter Stephian once again. He's the chair of the Development Committee. Andy Filoso, who was the founder of this lecture series 6 years ago. Herb Glassman, Bob Sturgis, Richard Hansen, Lenny Saulnier, Eric Reinhardt, and Mark Salsa, the Cascieri family representative, and Elizabeth Carr-Jones, who worked so diligently to prepare all the graphics work that you have received in the mail. And as you know, I've undertaken the responsibility of creating an endowment to support the lecture cost in the future. Until we are fully funded, we must rely upon colleagues for their contributions and generosity to help support this kind of evening. The costs are extensive, but it allows us to open up this kind of meeting to students, to faculty, to members, to friends, without any charge, and that's the way the dean would have liked it. And Beacon Skanska very quickly and very willingly came forward, and once again, on behalf of the committee and the BAC, to Beacon Skanska and its president, Mr. Becker, thank you. Dean Cascieri dedicated his life to the BAC for over 70 years as a teacher, a mentor, a dean, and a volunteer. And I know from personal experience that if it wasn't for him and his direct intervention in this school during World War II and subsequent to that, there would be no school that exists known as the Boston Architectural Center. Without his contributions of time and energy, conveniently wrapped in the cloak of wisdom, he brought together a blending of the professional and academic requirements to create a program, an integral program for architecture and interior design practiced in most of the offices throughout Boston and New England. He did so much, which is why this series is so important to his memory and to his work. This lecture marks another commemoration of the dean and his values, a sculptor once defined as a poet with a mallet, an educator, a man who served this institution from 1937 to 1997, the year of his death, a quiet, unassuming man who taught by example. He was known as Dean Cascieri, the Dean, Archangelo, Angelo, Uncle, Angel, Poppy, but perhaps known best to the BAC community simply as Cass. And at this moment, I'd like to introduce a person who knew the Dean as Angel, a gifted artist in her own domain, and a person who shared the BAC dream with her husband, who gave us him and nurtured his volunteer effort and wisdom, allowing this school to grow into the institution it is today. I'd like to present to you Ida DiBicari Cascieri. Ida, would you stand, please? Thank you, Ida. Nice to see you again. While preparing an introduction of our Cascieri lectures, invariably I find myself seeking a common thread that reflects the goals and ideals of Dean Cascieri with the goals and message of the lecturer. And previous Cascieri lecturers have delivered scholarly and enlightened presentations on architecture, urban planning, urban design, art, and artists, each viewed in the human embrace, in the human experience. Tonight's speaker is no exception. While developing this introduction, it reminded me of another time in history, quite specifically the Renaissance. And the Renaissance, as you know, is a period of time ill-defined somewhere between the 14th and 15th century, and a certain phase in the development of Europe. One measure of definition denotes the transition from that period called the Middle Ages to that which we call modern. In its literal and etymological meaning of the word, Renaissance is a rebirth. The elusive question is, a rebirth of what? Encyclopedia Britannica refers to two definitions of the Renaissance. One is the revival of learning, and the second signifies the entrance of the European nations upon a fresh stage of vital inquiry and energy. The Renaissance was a period of transition, fusion, preparation, and which emulated masterworks of literature, art, architecture, and philosophy. And it provoked inquiry and it encouraged criticism, shattered the narrow mental barriers imposed by the medieval orthodoxy. Tonight's speaker's life's work speaks to a period of transition unmatched by any individual effort in this city. Our lecturer will be interviewed by journalist and Bostonian Christopher Lydon of WBUR FM radio, whose show The Connection is so widely applauded, who also happened to deliver our third annual Cascieri lectureship here. His interviewee was born in Dorchester, and with the exception of a few months he spent in Connecticut, he spent his entire life living in Boston. He graduated from Boston Latin at age 15 and was accepted into Harvard University at age 16, at which point he applied. Now, having two other siblings already in college, there were no funds in the family coffer for him. He sought a scholarship, and they said, come back next year. He returned next year, and they said, come back next year. At which point, as the story goes, he literally walked from Harvard across the city over to MIT, applied, was accepted, got his scholarship, passed his chemistry exam, and the rest is history. And I think Harvard's been kicking themselves in the endowment ever since. But during World War II, this renaissance began with working on shipping, converting ocean liners into troop carriers. And after the war, he with his brother Robert began their version of the Renaissance again by redoing virtually every storefront in the city of Boston, requiring Carnier to open a local distribution center. This work led to more auspicious work, such as the IHOP in Brighton, toll plazas on the New York freeway, sewage treatment plants, Nike sites, military housing, and the still open until 2 a.m. in the morning Bickfords on Route 1 in Sharon. Our speaker is the founder and chairman of the Beacon Companies. The company established new corporate directions and standards with the development of Wellesley Office Park at the corner of Route 9 and 128, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Following this development was the proposal for Center Plaza. And that was a significant investment because at that point in time when they opened the proposals, there was only one private developer who had the faith and vision in the city to submit a proposal. He believed in Boston, he believed in what it stood for, and he built in Boston. He also believed that he could break the $5 per square foot ceiling for office space rent at that time. No one believed it was possible. He had the faith, the vision, when none existed, when no one believed. And you will see during this evening, if nothing else, our guest has had a love affair with Boston. He did believe in Boston. He continues to hold that faith in the city. Under his leadership, the Beacon Companies has developed such noteworthy and civic-minded projects as Rose Wharf, One Post Office Square, the Meridian Hotel, Center Plaza, South Station, and 75 State Street, to mention a few. He has dedicated his career to improving the city as a builder, a civic activist, a philanthropist. He spearheaded the creation of Post Office Square Park, and in honor of his leadership and efforts, the park has been rededicated in his name. He was instrumental in forming the Artery Business Committee, serving as its chairman for several years, and is currently chairman of the Trust for City Hall Plaza, the public-private initiative established by Mayor Menino to revitalize City Hall Plaza. He has built and managed several thousand housing units, many for low and moderate income people. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Lydon will be interviewing, and I am honored to present our 6th annual Dean Arcangelo Cascieri Lecturer in the Humanities, Norman Leventhal.
Bernie, thank you. I think this is the Norman Leventhal connection. I'd summarize all that, Bernie, by saying, let's face it, we all want to be Norman Leventhal when we grow up. He's rich. He backed the right guy in the mayor's race. He's done important projects. He's also, and I think this is important, he's a kind of old-fashioned Boston guy. The Dorchester Latin School, Harvard or MIT route. I mean, he's an important guy in Boston who actually grew up here, and that to be treasured. He's also an extremely nice person. Norman, I want to begin on City Hall Plaza I think there are professionals here who may be loaded for bear on the subject. But I'd like just to ask you, first of all, I want to say, connection style, we'll go to the phones very quickly. I just get a few shots in. So be ready, and don't tell me I should have asked something. It's your, it's your opportunity to ask Norman Leventhal or tell him anything you want. But I just want to ask you about City Hall Plaza. You were present at the creation in the Logue Collins days. It wouldn't be there in a certain sense, but for you. How would you, in short form, define the problem of City Hall Plaza, and in what way does this solve it?
First, let me say that after the introduction, I thought I might just thank everybody and go home.
You may,
And further to that, I had never met Chris Lydon, and I met him for the first time a few weeks ago. We had dinner, and I'm delighted to be with him. But this is the first experience for me, Chris, being interviewed, so I'll do the best I can.
You do fine. Nobody gets hurt on the connection. We always tell people that.
But in terms of City Hall Plaza, all you have to do is walk down to see City Hall Plaza, what City Hall Plaza is. It is a barren wasteland. That's as simple as it is. And something has to be done about it, and that's what we're trying to do.
Ed Logue has stopped talking to me for saying things like that. Do you ever say that to him?
But what?
Barren wasteland, that kind of thing. You cut too much, Ed, that kind of talk.
I never had any problem talking to Ed Logue in a very straightforward fashion, and had a wonderful relationship with him. And Ed Logue was very important. In fact, he was the individual who created the Walk to the Sea. It was Ed Logue who was responsible for what you see on the waterfront. And if I may, Chris, you see here a drawing in back of us right now. And if you take the Walk to the Sea, and I didn't have a chance to look at this one here, but you can start up here at the State House. That's supposed to be the Walk to the Sea. You come down Beacon Street by the Athenaeum. You're supposed to go through the old courthouse, but they've shut that off. That's a shame. And I think we're too concerned today about security. I think we're becoming so security-driven that it's affecting our society, but that's another subject. Then you go through through Pemberton Square, a wonderful space, but we haven't been able to fix it up to make it really work, because we have not been able to figure out how to solve the problem of getting the activity there. And there's a challenge for all of you. Go through Center Plaza, through 3 Center Plaza, and you walk down across the street and you go by Cornhill. That was the one building that was saved in that whole area, Cornhill. That's not Cornhill Street, people. That's just Cornhill. That's what they call it. That's the name. You walk down here and you walk through City Hall Plaza. City Hall Plaza, and then you see City Hall over here. And there's 28 State Street, which was built about the same time, just after we built Center Plaza. You walk across the street, and on the right you'll see 60 State Street, built at that time too. Remember, this is the 1960s. And then you walk down through the Faneuil Hall Marketplace. Faneuil Hall Marketplace, that is a private development. It's public space, but Rouse developed that. A public space taken over for private use, remember that. And it works. I'm going to get a pitch in for City Hall Plaza all the way through here. I hope you don't mind it. And then you walk down here, and of course on the right-hand side you'll see the Custom House 1 block over. You walk all the way down through the Quincy Market, and you end up crossing over Atlantic Avenue, and you end up at the Marriott Hotel. Not very welcoming. Then you take a right and you take Harbor Walk by the aquarium. Now all this is off the map. by the aquarium, which is wonderful, and the new addition, I think, should add a lot to it. You take the harbor walk by Harbor Towers, which should be elsewhere. And harbor walk, go across the boardwalk over to Rose Wharf. And I think Rose Wharf is terrific. And we.
I want to interrupt you just one sec. I mean, I think the flavor of your, your knowledge of this, in your street sense of the city is exactly right. But let me just ask, my sense of that space, and you and I have talked about it, is that it was designed in imitation of Siena, really, the building and the plaza. But Siena is an oval. Siena is enclosed. The curse of this space is that it has too many walks to the sea. It has a walk everywhere. It has a look everywhere. It goes everywhere. It's completely uncontained, and it sprawls socially. And moreover, as a result, there's no cafe space. There's no sitting space. There's no soccer space or old folk space or kid space, which the Siena Piazza is just full of. How can it be contained? And is this the move with with the hotel and with your plan a step in the right direction?
You'd make a great urban planner.
Well, I'd just be in Italy all the time.
You're absolutely right, Chris, and you have to have activity. I went to Siena a few years ago, took some granddaughters there. I went to Rome, looked at some plazas there too. And the key to the success of any of these plazas, and remember, this is a plaza, this is not a park. For public activity, a lot of activity.
Short form, what's the difference between a plaza and a park?
A lot of green as opposed to a lot of hard surface, which would with a lot of activity on it.
Can Americans do plazas is the short form of the question.
Absolutely. And
do we want plazas? Do we like plazas? Do we go to plazas? I'm not sure we do.
Absolutely. We can have a wonderful plaza here at City Hall Plaza if we create the activity along the edges and define the area. We have an edge here, we have an edge here, an edge here, an edge here with activity. That's what counts. That's what makes a plaza. And having different opportunities for different types of activities within the plaza itself.
We'll let people come back to the City Hall Plaza question if they want to pursue it, and I suspect they do. But just in the short form, what's the lesson, the moral of Post Office Square, for which you're always given credit, properly I think? What's the moral of that planning process, of the design process for City Hall Plaza?
Well, first we have to recognize that the Post Office Square is a park. It's in an area in the financial district, relatively small. City Hall Plaza is a plaza, and the constituency is for the entire city. We have to recognize that.
Is the space manageable? You've got so much sort of wilderness in that City Hall area. Is it a doable thing, do you think?
No question in my mind.
Okay.
The problems are similar. We had the same problems at Post Office Square. We had a lot of objections. At one time we worked with Mayor White and then with Ray Flynn, who came in afterwards, and somebody wanted to put up a 40-story building there. Of course, when they went to the BRA and they showed the model and the fact that it would not cast any shadow, the model was all made of transparent material.
I'd like to just ask you a very general question about the South Boston waterfront. A lot of people, I mean, it is your front yard there in Rose Wharf, so to speak. I was going to say a lot of people are concerned. I'm concerned, A, about the plan, but also the process. It strikes me, just to be blunt about it, we've said this on the radio, that the BRA plan is a non-plan, and they've given no, in terms of eminent domain taking, in terms of boldness of design, they've defaulted on an immensely rare, important project for this whole city. I want you to know, I'd love to know Norman Leventhal's straight-talking vision of that space, and whose feet can we put to the fire to get a real process going?
If I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be here right now. But a couple of things, seriously. That is an area for major growth of the city of Boston, as well as the surface of the artery, which I'd like to talk about later on. I think there are great opportunities, and I think the waterfront has to be respected. And I think we have respected it at Rose Wharf, and it can be done there as well. There are issues of height they're talking about there. And I don't think you measure height by the length of a whale. I don't know if you read the article in the Globe recently, that a building should only be as high as the length of a whale. But I think what we have to do is not consider height per se as the issue. The issue is urban planning. What is the massing going to be? What is the uses going to be? Mixed use is most important. You have to have housing. You have to have retail.
Housing has been virtually written out of that plan. It's all hotels and offices.
When I grew up in the city of Boston, the population was 800,000. Today it is under 600,000. We need more people, not only in the other parts of the city, but downtown. You need people there, and you need mixed-use development with housing, with office buildings, retail. You need to create an environment where people feel comfortable and want to stay and feel comfortable staying in that particular area.
Have you talked to your friend Tom Menino about this stuff?
Look, Mayor Menino, when he asked me to do this, asked me to do at the same time at Christopher Columbus Park. I said, Mayor, one at a time. I'm not involved with that one. I haven't talked about it.
I'd like to, to open it up in general, but I'd also you've done so many projects with so many different kinds of architects. There's no one look to Beacon Properties' work. I'd like you to give us the short course on architect relations, how you pick them, how you work with them. I'd like to know the relationship between a successful architectural relationship and a successful building, a happy project. What does sort of design happiness contribute to long-term sort of glow of a project in your mind, in your memory?
Well, first, to break it down into two parts, a project has to end up being happy, and a project has to stand the test of time. I had an uncle who told me when I was young that when you meet a girl, look at her mother. That's what she's going to be a generation hence. The same thing applies to a building. Don't judge it until 20 or 25 years later. I'm an engineer. I was trained as an engineer. I did end up being a naval architect for some strange reason during World War II, but I'm basically an engineer. Fortunately, I've learned an awful lot from architects. I've learned from all of you that are here and others who are not here. And I guess the best example would be Center Plaza. We were the only ones who submit a proposal for Center Plaza was mentioned. We hired Welton Beckett, an architectural firm in California. They had done a lot of office buildings. We knew nothing about it. I remember going down to New York with my brother Robert, and we sat down with the architectural firm, and they said, "What is your program?" We looked at them. We didn't know what a program was. I'm serious. Now I know what a program is.
You should have said the connection.
They came up with a design and presented it to the BRA. Ed Logue had a unique group. It was Pietro Beluschi, Vincent Kling, Harry Weiss, and I think it was Dean Perkins of the University of Pennsylvania Design Review Panel. They looked at the design. In words of one syllable, it was awful.
Who said that?
All of them. Well, we had to go back to Welton Beckett. I called Welton Beckett, who was alive at the time. I recognize that you had to understand that an architect should be respectful for what he had done, and you don't just say, hey, throw this all out. We said, come on to Boston, let's see what we can work out. So we came with a designer and a few other people, and we sat down with Pietro Belluschi. And Pietro Belluschi played a major role in resolving what the exterior and the design of the building. Instead of the building being 60 feet deep as I.M. Pei had designed it in the master plan, Walton Beckett made it 93 feet, which is the proper depth for an office building. I knew nothing about it, but I learned. Pietro Belluschi came up with the idea of the brick infill. I remember going down to MIT when he was Dean of the School of Architecture and Planning at the time, meeting with him, and he became my mentor. He was my mentor for years until he went back to Portland, Oregon. And it's been a series of these situations. That's how I've learned to understand a little better and perhaps to ask the right questions.
What does it say that you, at least as I observe it, your buildings, they all are rather individual? You've never settled down with one architect or one beacon company look? Why do you keep shopping? And then what have been the best and the worst of your sort of architecture connections?
Fair question. Each building has to be suited to the particular location in terms of massing and the environment. A building should not go up there and stand up like a sore thumb. Or be Trumpified.
Catch that, okay.
So I think we are not concerned about any particular style, but we want a building that will fit into the particular locale.
And then, again, this is all condensed, but I mean, did you work with architects? I mean, obviously you work with them, but what was the give and take? What was the second guessing? How many people get in on it? Did you yourself become a kind of, in the Kevin White mode, a kind of architect manqué?
I don't profess to be an architect or professional. I think I learned to be somewhat of a critic, and as I said before, to ask questions. A particular case in point. We were having Buzz Brandon, who's here tonight, who worked very closely with Belluschi, and Belluschi was our consultant. We were building a project in Springfield for some low and moderate income housing, a high rise. I saw the model, beautiful model. I said, Pietro, I don't like it. Doesn't look good. He agreed. I said, Pietro, we'll give you $200,000 more to fix that building up. Norman, nobody ever said that to me. It only cost $100,000 and ended up being a nice building.
When you think of your famous properties, what pleases you the most in terms of not only the architect relationship, but the result?
Well, I talked about the test of time, and I think the building that has best stood the test of time is Center Plaza.
Right.
Center Plaza is supposed to be a backdrop building for the City Hall Plaza. It is. Center Hall Plaza works financially, and Center Plaza fits in very well with the environment. I think there are others that we've done that I'm very pleased with. For example, Rose Wharf is another one that we've done that I think is terrific. And I think our conversion of the Meridian Hotel, if you take a look at some of the pictures out there, which shows the Meridian Hotel as the old Federal Reserve Bank with a flat roof, and we've added on the mansard on top. It is such a much better looking building. The way we fitted it in with Post Office Square is wonderful. And one of the best lobbies in the city of Boston is the lobby in One Post Office Square. Now, I want to make a contrast between two buildings. One is One Post Office Square and the other 75 State Street. One Post Office Square was built when the market rent was about $17 or $18 a square foot. And we used a skin in the building that was appropriate at that time, and we ended up with an energy efficiency which is higher than any building in the city, probably 18 kilowatt hours per square foot per year compared to 25 to 30 in the average building in the city of Boston. 175 75 State Street in turn reflects the environment at that time, and I think that's a lovely building except for one thing. It should have been taller, and we wanted to make it taller, but the BRA wouldn't let us make it taller. We had problems with the neighbors as well, but I think the lobby is a lovely lobby. And South Station, I love South Station.
What was your hand in that?
Well, we redeveloped the whole interior of South Station. Yeah.
Great. Listen, I think we're well begun, but I'd like to enlist the architects here and the professionals and the BAC people and everybody else in this thing, for which I'm greatly underqualified to begin with. But please, stand and deliver. Just stand and shout a question or a comment. I hope we don't spend all our time on City Hall Plaza, but that's obviously a very big deal and it's of interest to all of us. Just one last question. You've alluded to the space over what will be the submerged expressway. It was a big surprise to me, and it was a big surprise to very hot-blooded listeners in our program that so much of that space will be highway again. But I wonder what's your view in general, Norman Leventhal, of the space over the submerged highway when it's done?
I think the roadway system, having the 3 lanes on either side, is terrific. It's the right thing to do. It will be relatively narrow, and I think that will work. What concerns me is what is or is not going to happen on the surface of the artery. The present plans call for 75% open space, and that is wrong. I'm certainly in favor of parks. You can hear, because I hope you respect that because of what I've been involved with. But you need to put structures in to tie the financial district in with the waterfront. You have to put structures up there that have housing, they have office and retail, create a neighborhood there. That's what we need there. They're doing it in the north end, they're putting some housing there, and I don't know why housing can't go elsewhere. Now, people will talk about the economics of it, but the economics could be helped if they provide some more FAR to put structures there, allow more structure to be built. And mixed use would work there. Mixed use would make all the difference in the world if we had mixed use development on the top of the artery.
Excellent, thank you. Please, help us out here.
There is a microphone.
Yeah, we can probably hear you too.
I remember one Center Plaza when it was built, they put a sign to be continued. Everybody thought at that time that the people who built the building are crazy because it will never be rented. But then we went to 2 Center Plaza, 3 Center Plaza. I met you. My name is Dmitry Gorchev. You were one of the guinea pigs, if I may say nicely, using variable volume systems. One of the first variable volume systems, the air conditioning system in new buildings. And there were some problems. And I was surprised to find out that you know more about air conditioning than the engineers who designed the building. So it's very important for people that there are people like you who know more about air conditioning than other people. So you know plenty of details of buildings. And I was happy to be involved with a building like yours to have one of the first variable volume systems. Thank you.
Is there a question?
No, this is
Two?
no, the question is,
Okay.
I should have a question. My question is, I like to get involved in some of your buildings where I turn equipment rooms into usable space. This is the question, if it's possible.
Would you, I didn't get it.
You gotta state it again. It's not clear to me.
Air conditioning systems are very much behind in a way in buildings. They occupy too much space and they use too much energy. And I was pleased to find out the Post Office Square uses very little energy. But many buildings, like even the harbor, the complex and the waterfront, the equipment rooms are too large. And they could be retrofitted to become smaller. So the question is, can we help you to do it?
Can you help me with that question?
He'd like to be your air conditioning consultant. Leave your business card. We'll work on it. Are there questions specifically about City Hall Plaza? Please.
There are people in the other room, so they need the microphone to be able to hear.
Okay.
If the city council...
Bernie, take the mic.
If the city council and mayor revised their thinking and made sufficient funds available to utilize City Hall Plaza for public purposes alone, would you still favor the installation of a hotel there? If we could finance the revitalization of City Hall Plaza without private funding, would there still be a demand or a need for a hotel there?
That's like asking me the question, if I met a beautiful girl, would I marry her when I'm already married?
I don't believe it is. I believe... Are you saying you're married to a hotel there no matter what transpires politically?
I am committed to accomplish what the mayor asked us to do, was to improve City Hall Plaza, recognizing that there would be no source of funds to do anything else.
Your contribution has been significant because it has awakened the city to the need to fund it. The climate has changed since that original request. We've been awakened to the need to fund the revitalization of City Hall Plaza, but the hotel proposal stands in our way.
I think it would be unfair to take money away from the parks and the suburbs, which need all the funds the city can provide to accomplish what should be done in the various districts of the city of Boston.
Well, the hotel linkage could be provided in another location.
Is the answer no, Norman? I mean,
it's a hypothetical question, and I don't think it warrants an answer.
well, it's not hypothetical. In that if there were money, would you still want a hotel? I think that's a fair question.
I would want activity there, and it's very likely that a hotel would be very desirable, because you must remember, the first thing I did when I got involved with City Hall Plaza is go to see the people at GSA, and I said I'd like to take the first floor of the GSA building and create some activity, but I couldn't do that. We have to have an edge with activity.
Okay.
And we think that that edge is most important.
Okay.
Just about anything would add activity to City Hall Plaza. No example of a hotel adding much activity. The Ritz doesn't add much activity. The public art, neither does the Four Seasons. Hotels don't add activity to residents.
Just take a look at Rose Wharf, what it's done to that area with the mixed use there, with the housing and the hotel and office building. It's changed that whole environment.
Bernie, thank you. Please.
Mr. Leventhal, I think your description of the history and the concern about public space has been perfectly marvelous. And I think your recognition of the value of Faneuil Hall Market as one of our finest public-private partnerships is absolutely correct. And I think the buildings you've done along the waterfront are really wonderful. I think that what we're looking at is the whole idea of public-private partnerships and how they work. And you started with Post Office Square, gathering the people around there and building something perfectly marvelous as a garden. I agree with you that this is a square. And like Siena, which has horses as well as all kinds of activities, it needs all of those activities too. Siena is surrounded by hotels that are around the outside, and so can this plaza. I would like to draw your attention to one of the examples of a public-private partnership, which I think we're all really, really proud of, and that's Back Bay. Back Bay was built at a period when we weren't thinking of deficit economic systems. We were thinking of surplus economic thinking systems. People were coming from all over the world to Boston to explore and wonder about the wonderful things that we were doing. Back Bay is the most marvelous example of a public-private partnership which didn't worry about the money in any less or any other practical sense than you do. What it really meant was the value of a public space. It was privately financed. The Back Bay, the streets, The system was built 24 hours a day out of the excitement that was generated. It was everybody's plan. It had 28 churches, all of the schools, all of the places to buy things. It had a marvelous, marvelous, comprehensive plan and an architectural system that is still being built today. It has a scale that's absolutely wonderful, and it doesn't have to stick way up in the air in order to do it. That's the kind of thing we would like to see. And I think we're talking about the diversity of
Are you talking about the waterfront
uses.
or downtown or where?
I think that the thing we need to stop worrying about so much is having to find just single systems for financing this. It's the multiple diverse systems of financing it. If you look at Back Bay, practically every house which dresses that
Are you
marvelous.
talking about the South Boston waterfront, for example? Or are you talking about the space over the expressway?
Since Ed Loeb's help from the federal government, and after all, City Hall Plaza was built with urban renewal funds. Since those urban renewal funds started an activity based upon deficit financing, and the whole idea that we had to build to breed a domestic economy, we have seen buildings popping up in the air, occupying places all over the city, and really changing its face from the scale of the things that we really recognize represent the city. I think it's time that we build quality to last rather than tall things without that kind of concern. And to do that, we have to spend more money. And we have to find other ways to fund it than just single entities.
Okay, I've lost the thread here. Norman, is there something you want to respond to there?
There's nothing for me to respond to.
Okay. Okay. Please.
Back here in the back, I'd like to thank Peter Rauterbush for a wonderful supporting comment about the effort down which City Hall Plaza is currently going.
You got to decode that. I'm not sure what you mean.
Peter gave a wonderful endorsement of the plan in front of us about City Hall Plaza. It was a little convoluted in getting there, but I think he gave a fabulous endorsement. I wanted to thank him very much.
Hello. I'd like to ask your opinion on a few related questions. One is the new federal courthouse is trying to plan their public realm right now. And I'd like to ask your thoughts on how they can make that as vibrant as possible. And in relation to that, the space immediately in front of it and the old Northern Avenue Bridge. What is in the long-term public interest to put to that use, and what to do with the old Northern Avenue Bridge?
First, I think the new courthouse as a structure per se is a beautiful building, but I think it would have been much better if it had been elsewhere, more in the heart of the city. Just remember, if I may, that if you take a point right here and draw a circle 1 mile out, all the way around, you'll hit the waterfront in the north end, you'll go as far as South Station. This is the center of the city. But in terms of the courthouse, I think it would have been so much better if the courthouse had been in this particular area. As far as the Northern Avenue Bridge, I would love to see something happen with that old Northern Avenue Bridge. But really, nobody has been able to come up with something that would work, and I hope that they would.
Would you recommend that it go away?
I would recommend that we tried a little longer to see if we can make it work.
And
Because
now
you do have there, it's very interesting, you have 3 bridges there. You have the Northern Avenue Bridge, you have the Congress Street Bridge, you have the Summer Street Bridge, and you have 3 bridges there. There's something, if we could do something to make each one of them individualistic in some way, I think we could have a great opportunity.
Now that the new courthouse is where it is, they are planning right now what to do with the space around it outside. Do you have any ideas of what you think would work well in that area?
I have not followed that closely enough to comment. I hope they can. I hope we have activity there where people can use the space.
And the space in front of it?
Pardon?
And the space in front of it, where the old Northern Avenue Bridge meets Old Northern Avenue. that open space there that has the long-term potential to be something very special.
Are you talking about the, on the fan pier side?
On the fan pier side, where it's now just barriers to cars going through.
Well, I don't know. I can't comment on that. I don't know.
Thank you.
Please. We got questions over here, Ted? Could I ask, while the mic is moving, I'd be interested, Norman, if you'd just be so bold. You've been a close partner of the BRA for many, many years. In your own experience, what are the high marks and low marks of that institution been, and how's it doing these days? Marissa Lago came sort of unheralded, left unmourned. How is the BRA doing?
Well, first let me say that John Collins and Ed Logue did a fantastic job, and they were a terrific team together. They had a major impact on the city of Boston, which we all certainly should appreciate today. I think it's quite unfortunate what's happened in the sense that the funding for the BRA has decreased, the staff has decreased over a period of time, and the current director is facing a very difficult situation with a reduced staff and reduced budget. And I would hope that he could overcome that problem. One of the issues, I think, is that in terms of design, during the BRA period, during the Ed Logue period, the head of design was a fellow named Charlie Hilgenhurst, and many of you remember Charlie, I'm sure. And he was in charge of design and had the authority to do so. I would hope that our current director would adopt such an approach, and perhaps he has people within the organization or outside that could fulfill that role, and I think it would make a big difference.
Thank you. Okay.
Norman, a moment ago, you were asked a couple of hypothetical questions about the hotel, and for many of us who know you, you responded with uncharacteristic annoyance, if not pique. And while many of us know that you are no sweetheart, to put it mildly, we also have usually seen you quite open to a public-spirited debate on a topic. So if the audience doesn't mind, I'd like to ask you to answer it again. Why a hotel? What's your vision for the plaza? Why did it annoy you so much to hear the question? Are you tired of the public debate, or do you in fact have money in this project?
What was the last part, please?
It was, never mind. But would you respond again?
Why a hotel?
Yeah.
Very simple. When we looked into creating activity around the various edges of City Hall Plaza, I told you earlier that the first thing I did was talk to the GSA to do something about that level. Then we considered what other type of activity we could create there. We considered housing, we considered office space, we considered retail, and we considered a hotel. I don't know what else you can do there. And we thought that the activity created by the hotel would be most advantageous, incorporated with it retail activities. That is why we did it. And it was not an economic decision at the time, but was one, what is best for City Hall Plaza?
Okay. Is that...
Mr. Leventhal, I agree with you about the hotel because my name is Bill Green, and I worked in the city, and I had an office in 3 Center. What I have always felt about that area, it is incredibly sterile. The Center Plaza is empty on the weekends. The public buildings, such as the JFK I.M. Pye building in City Hall, and even the Sears Crescent, they can't even hold a small coffee shop. Nobody is attracted to that area. And I think a hotel would fit, just as the Westin pours thousands of people out into Copley Square. But what I would like to ask you, my question is, I think that the citizens of Boston, and in particular this city is getting very diverse, radically different than it used to be. They aren't being invited into the public debate, and they somehow feel like it's irrelevant to them. And if this is the heart of the city, then the people ought to be more connected to their own city in the heart of the city itself. So what are you, or maybe the mayor, doing to incorporate people in the city into this, this process?
That is a fair question, and I think we've had a process which is much greater than most of the people realize, and if you read our report, you'll see a lot of that. And we are now in the process of going out into the various communities. Some of our people went out into the Dorchester area last night, and they're going into other areas as well, and we continue to do that. We are trying to reach out, and we can continue to do so.
Sometimes I think, I think the average person gets a sense that they don't count. And this is across the country now, but I think Boston, we've always been, and I went to Latin school and I grew up in the city. I always felt that whatever I had to say meant something. And I get a sense that the Hispanic and the Chinese, the Asian communities and the Afro-American communities don't have much to say about what's going on in the downtown area. That's all I want to say.
Well, I might say, Chris, there have been 3 or 4 hearings at City Hall, and people had the opportunity to come there as well. But that's a constant question, and it's a proper question, and the process and outreach is important, but process and process and process can end up with more process, and sometimes you have to make decisions.
Can I just bend the question to deal with the South Boston waterfront? I mean, that is treated like a decision that South Boston must make, and I often wonder why. And I also wonder, frankly, why the mayor hasn't elevated the choices for the city on that waterfront to bring everybody into the discussion.
I have not been involved with it, Chris. I can't answer that. I think you're right. They should be brought in. I think a proper master plan should be prepared. And, but South Boston is adjacent to the area. It's contiguous. There's a traffic issue as well. So I can't comment beyond that, Chris.
Okay, one just more mischievous question for me.
Can I do one thing, if I may, Chris? I'd like to know from the people here, we've heard comments about City Hall Plaza, and I appreciate the comments for and against, but I'd like to hear from you people right now, how many people think that something has to be done with City Hall Plaza, that it's a barren wasteland? Raise your hands. That's what I like to hear. That's it. Now, one more question, if I may. How many people like the concept of the model that's out there today? Raise your hands. Come on, let's hear from you. Good, good. Well, at least we seem to have a vocal minority, and we want the majority to speak out. So speak out, and there may be some sheets out there, and sign up and tell us you like it.
What about the people who don't like it? What do they do?
Let them make the noise, all the noise they want.
Okay.
We welcome it.
All right.
Hello?
Ted, where's the mic?
May I make a comment? First thing, I'd like to compliment you. I think you are on the wrong business. You should be an architect. Second, you made a good comment when you said that the ingredients that make the city, they're missing, is missing the residential area, the people. You cannot have a square, a plaza, a piazza, without the integration of space and people activities. So you have a 50% missing. How you can achieve a full result on a square, which is on an area of transition, morning and afternoon. That's it.
You raise a very good point about housing. You're talking about housing in City Hall Plaza. Is that what you're saying? Yes. But I don't think it's practical because you couldn't have enough housing there to warrant doing so. But let me add, when we built City Hall Plaza and complete it, you're going to see an impact on that whole area around there, as has happened with Post Office Square. Post Office Square has become the center of area, and it's improved the whole area. There's a great opportunity for development around there. There can be a lot of housing built around that area.
I agree with you, sir. The only thing I'm concerned that we have too much hope of too much improvement. It's not going to happen.
Point taken. Please.
Many years ago, when I was a student here at the center, I had an opportunity to travel in Europe, and I visited Siena. And one of the things I'll never forget is waking up in the morning and hearing this little low hubbub outside of my hotel window, and it was the plaza, and it was just filled and jammed with people, and it was beautiful, and there was all sorts of activity. But that was a very compact city, and there were a lot of residents within arm's length of the plaza. The City Hall Plaza, although well-intended, I think was an anachronism because there isn't that intensity in Boston to cover that kind of activity in that center. It's a big problem for you, and I understand that. But what's there now, I'm not totally in accord with. I think we should try to get more toward the human aspect of city life into this area. How we do it is a good question.
Fair enough. Have you explained, Norman, why you didn't think residential development of that space was viable?
For a couple of reasons. I don't think enough could be built there to make it viable. And the question is, what income level do you put there? You'd have to put in some affordable housing as well. I'm certainly in favor of affordable housing. It had to be combined there. And we didn't think it would work.
Okay. Please.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Leventhal. My question to you is, like the gentleman before, the gentleman here, City Hall in downtown Boston belongs to all the neighborhoods. And I go into City Hall almost every single day. And I hear you talk about housing and talking about reaching into the neighborhoods. And as a single parent in the inner city, I go into City Hall every day fighting for my affordable housing. And also when I go downtown, I do not see my culture. And what I mean by that, if we're going to put a hotel on the plaza of City Hall, is it not about time that it be a black hotel? Is it not about time that the merchant commercial space be black and Hispanic? You know, we are part of the city. And I live in one of your housing complex that was a tax credit of over $18 million. And that money came in on my skin color. And construction started, and my son lives there. And he was supposed to have a unit, $50,000 worth of work done in his unit with central air conditioning. And he moved back in it last Sunday. And my son was born in the disruption of Blue Hill Avenue. That's where I gave birth to my son. And all that was put in his unit was $3,000. So somebody took my son off for $45,000 in his affordable housing. And then it was a partnership. And I went to the Registry of Deed, and we were not even registered on the deed. Okay. So these are the questions that I put before, and the challenge that I put before the mayor, yourself, the trust, and everybody. Are we putting Newbury Street in the front and Lower Roxbury in the back? We need the same thing that everybody's looking for. Okay. And talk about a waterfront. I was born in a waterfront in New Bedford, 556 Water Street. So, you know, if we're going to do something on the waterfront, let's balance the scale and let's let everybody into the city. Thank you.
Is there an answer to that set of questions or not?
I'm very supportive of more affordable housing. We have over 1,000 units of affordable housing in the Hyde Park area. We have it at various parts of the country, and we think more should be, I agree with you, more should be built in the city of Boston.
I'm talking about Mandela. Mandela is not in Hyde Park. Mandela is in Roxbury, the open way into the
What's the question about Mandela for Norman Leventhal?
The question of Mandela is how come we have to be managed for 17 years when it was a tax credit? How come we cannot get our deed now?
But that's not a Leventhal project.
That's vacant property.
Is it? I beg your pardon.
Yes, it is.
One of the companies that we have has taken over.
I beg your pardon, sorry.
Has taken over Mandela since it went into bankruptcy, and we're in the process of rebuilding it. And I think you and all of us are going to be proud of what we do with it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll bring the report of it tomorrow.
it's been very interesting to hear you indeed, and I've had some wonderful times, even in spite of the state of City Hall Plaza as it is. And I dream of other times focusing, as happens in First Night and so forth, focusing on the arts. It's a marvelous place for music, for dance, for even, well, I think even of a merry-go-round. It would be just so great to have some of those things that bring people for recreation and for the arts, which I think that you only exist if you don't have some opportunity to be exposed to some form of art.
I couldn't agree with you more. We need more activities there. The Trust for City Hall Plaza has had some activities during the summer, such as tennis, and we brought people in from the entire city to participate in the tennis. We've had other activities as well. I personally have attended an oldies concert with my wife there at City Hall Plaza during the summer, and the only problem was it wasn't oldie for me. It didn't go back far enough. But I thought it was wonderful, but there were a couple of problems with it. Number one, the seating was terrible. I couldn't sit in those steps there. The location wasn't the greatest, although there were probably 15 or 20,000 people there. And further, what concerns me most is there were no people of color there. And we have to have activities there that attract people in from all of the city.
Fair enough. Let's do 3 more questions.
Norman, there are 2 things that you said that caught my ear. One was that we're talking about a plaza, not a park. I agree with that. I also think that none of the designs so far have lived up to that, hotel or no hotel. The other thing that caught my ear was you said at one point, I think in reference to why a hotel, that the mayor said the mayor didn't have enough money, and therefore he asked me to figure out some way to get some money to fix up the plaza, which we all agree needs to be fixed up. One thing I could say, regardless of what happens, Norman Leventhal should be in charge of it. I'll say that. But beyond that, what might we need to get the mayor to give you a new marching order?
Somebody else will have to answer that question. I'm sorry. I can't get any more money from the mayor. And especially if it comes away from the parks and other areas in the other areas of the city.
I wonder if I may ask an architectural question for a change, just because we're at an architectural school here and I'm an architect. I hear people compare City Hall Plaza with Siena and Ravenna and San Marco Piazza and Venice, and yet I look at this project and what I see a blank brick wall, non-committal, sterile, and utterly mediocre. I wonder what you think about quality of architecture of your project.
Well, let me say that this is just a massing plan. There is no architecture involved at all at the present time. We have not engaged an architect to design anything at the present time.
Does that answer the point to your satisfaction?
I think it will stay that way. Just like most of the Boston architecture is mediocre. It will remain mediocre.
My name is Claire Moorhead. I have seen various piazzas around Europe, and another one that hasn't been mentioned, for instance, is outside the Pompidou in Paris. A hotel might increase the tax base, but it's going to be filled with transients. What is needed there is something for the people of the city of Boston.
Like what?
Any kind of activity that attracts, whether it's housing or activities for families or housing. But a hotel is, as I understand it, for transients. And that's not going to keep the life of the city centralized. It might provide a few jobs, maybe, and increase the tax base, as I said, but I'm not in favor of a hotel.
Norman Leventhal.
I respect your viewpoint, but I don't agree.
Last thought, please.
I wanted to make a comment about the plan and then ask you another question. I've gone through the same reductive exercise that you have, which is why this building versus another. And I come to the same conclusion, that it's a building which would have 24-hour use, lights and activity, and generate activity on the plaza from the public-private interface. And I like what it's doing on the northern edge, and as the southern edge as well, being reinforced by the crescent. So I would hope that something would eventually develop which is on the western edge, which is by Cambridge Street. So I want to tell you that I think the vision which is established is good, and I'm sure that as it evolves, I think it'll be right and better scale for the plaza. But the question I have for you, sir, is not about City Hall Plaza, but something you alluded to in the beginning of the evening, which is the linear park concept over the depressed artery. And I guess that vision is a very important one which is developing. And what would you suggest would be the method? There have been so many designs made for it and suggestions made. How can we reinforce the concept of knitting the neighborhoods back together with new construction and mixed-use development? So what would be your recommendation as to how to proceed with that? Thank you.
There has been a process, a plan that's been worked on over a period of years to determine what is going to happen on the surface of the artery. And it does show which parcels are going to be developed. I would hope that there could be a movement among people in the city such as yourselves and a change in policy to increase the amount of structures to go on top. That was going to require grassroots effort to make it happen. I think it's wrong. I agree with you, more should be done there. And something has, because all they're doing, my friend, is they're just seeding that area. There's no money to maintain it. And they put some structures up. People who put up the structures can maintain that area. So I think there has to be a change, and I hope somebody would take charge and make something happen there. All I'm doing is expressing my very strong opinion on this at the present time.
Well, that's your next opportunity, sir.
Norman, can I just ask you one last question? It seems to me, you know, we're really sort of back to where Jane Jacobs described the scene in the early 1960s. She, of course, was shocked and outraged that the expressway had gone through there in the first place. I thought the hope in burying the expressway was to let some of that north end grow back toward the city, let some of the Haymarket grow back toward the north end, and basically re-knit the city over. It strikes me that that's your idea too, that it could be allowed through commercial activity, through housing. You could almost overleap the whole gap. Is there any way of redesigning that plan now to let it happen? And are you talking to the BRA and the mayor about this kind of redesign?
I think we are knitting it to the north end by carrying Hanover Street all the way up. Hanover Street is a wonderful street. It originally came all the way to this location, to Cambridge Street. Hanover Street works in the north end. You have traffic on automobiles there. You have housing. You have everything. I don't think we can create. I don't see the practicality of putting housing in this particular location because we don't have enough buildable space to do what we'd like to do here. We're limited in terms of what we can do in height. If I could put 10 more stories on there, I'd put housing up there. But I think housing will eventually develop on this area once we do this.
Norman Leventhal, thank you very much. I think we've heard a tremendous amount of straight talk from a very interesting and experienced, wise man, and we thank you.
I have one last comment. Thank you. I have one last comment to make. For all the complaints that we have and all the problems we've heard, I've lived in this city all my life. I remember the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and 60s. And you take a look at the city of Boston today, despite all the problems and questions of architecture and urban planning, whatever you're talking about, today we have a great city. Let's make it better. Thank you. I don't know.
I would like to just, before you step down, Ms. Leventhal, if you would, Andy Filosa, who's the founder of this series, would you please come up? Insert for Norm Leventhal.
Yeah.
The Cascieri lectureship committee, Boston activities, and we are grateful for your contributions here tonight. The fact that you came here. Very interesting.
No one can hear you.
Andy.
All right. We're not finished yet. Hold it down, please. On behalf of the Cascieri Lectureship and the Boston Architectural Center, I would like to present this certificate in gratitude for your contribution, your presence here, and the lively forum that you created here, and it's been a very successful. You've helped to make this sixth event a very successful event, and we appreciate Rosewolf and other projects that you've done, and we look forward to more of those. And again, thank you for your contributions to the city and the Boston Architectural Center.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And just one last thing before, I'm not going to let Andy present this one, otherwise we'd be here till Saturday. But I would like to present this to Beacon Skanska on behalf of the Boston Architectural Center for their support this evening and for their contribution. And Mr. Becker hopefully will come forward and take this on behalf of Beacon Skanska. Thank you very much. Andy, thank you. Birthday cake and coffee is being served downstairs. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Leventhal. Thank you, Mr. Lydon. Good night, all.